Why is Detroit, 7 Mile, 8 Mile, considered the most dangerous city? And that is an interesting story because there are multiple videos on YouTube talking about the situation, interviewing people living there. One of those is No-Go Zones, World's Toughest Place, 7 Mile Road, Detroit, by Free Documentary. And once you're in, there is no going back, is one of the comments that was made by one of the locals living in Detroit. And in the video, it talks about the difficulties of life for a lot of people: poverty, crime, and decay. Police don't even bother because they don't want to die either, and they show up once the action is over. Gas stations on 7 Mile can be dangerous, especially at night. It says there is about 60% illiteracy rate in the area. Abandoned houses are used to hide drugs, guns, or even bodies. And you're thinking, no, yes, that is exactly what is happening. The women walk in the streets to make money as the only few options available. Bounty hunters trying to make a living catching wanted criminals. And you're thinking, what is going on? First of all, to understand what 7 Mile is all about, it says 7 Mile is 7 Mile Road in Detroit is infamous because it is one of the most dangerous no-go zones in the United States. It is a territory ruled by the 7 Mile Bloods, one of the most notorious gangs in the city. The area has been plagued with poverty, crime, and gang violence. However, it is important to know that not the entire road is dangerous. Some parts of it are perfectly fine. And that is an interesting thing because when people talk about 7 Mile Road, they talk about the dangerous part because, yeah, that's where all the newsworthy actions actually take place. But apparently, the road actually spans the length of the city. You can go from one end of the road to the other end. And when you start driving closer to this town center, it is fine. And then the further away you move from the town center, it seems then it's been taken over by crime and other issues. And that is not a place you would want to be. Another interesting point says Detroit, Michigan experienced a significant decline due to various factors, including the industrialization, population loss, and economic struggles. The city's automobile industry faced challenges leading to job losses and economic challenges. The decline culminated in insurmountable debt, which led Detroit to file for bankruptcy. But it wasn't always that easy for everyone because there are other issues like during the segregation in the 50s and 40s, and not everyone was able to profit from the booming economy of Detroit. And then one of the comments in the video said, "As a black man, I am ashamed of these cities and my own brothers and sisters. Black on black violence is the biggest killer in this country amongst young African women and men, but it's looked past as something that's not an issue. But if Black Lives Matters, then we need to prove that to everyone else by helping each other out first." And I think that is a valid point, saying we're looking at Detroit and saying, oh, there's violence, and most of the population in the most violent areas are blacks, and then you're thinking, why would they say Black Lives Matters if you're killing each other because of gang violence? And it's a valid point. But others have said that Detroit didn't just appear out of nowhere. You need to look at the history. We're going to look at that in another video, but the history actually shows that it never used to be like that. But once all the industry was gone and all the affluent people moved away to the suburbs, what you have left are poor people. And because the city declared a bankruptcy, what do? You can't really help anyone else. So people were left on their own. And once you're left on your own, the gangs took over. Crime started to increase because lack of opportunities. So it is an endless cycle. But anyway, it's still a valid point that black on black crime is something that needs to be addressed by the community. And another comment said, "I worked here as hospice nurse. You will also find some of the kindest people who have overcome so much. Vets who have fought for this country and people who built Detroit, treated with the respect you give." So, another aspect of this is that even if the crime is quite limited to some part of the city, it shows that not everyone is a criminal. Not everyone is involved in drug addictions. A lot of people are still struggling. They have jobs. They have to travel further away to get jobs, but they still live there and they are respectable members of society. But of course, when you want to talk about, you want ratings, the media would not really focus on the good people. To get ratings, you need to go to where all the actions, all the bad things are. And that is a valid point that someone says it's not all that bad. That's it. Another one. Inside Detroit Hood. First impression from Peter Santonello. And this video, well, Peter often goes to areas and try to talk to the locals and give people an overview, an idea of what life is really like from the local people's perspective. It says in its heydays, Detroit had about 1.8 million people, but now has about 800,000 since the economic decline. So the guide, I think the guy named John, a local, who took Peter to all the other areas, basically said, "Hey, look, I bought a house, a rundown house for 4K." And you're thinking a house in the United States for 4K? It is rundown, but it is absolutely amazing that you have different type of economies and a lot of things are just going on in parallel that you're thinking the richest country in the world with such a diverse economy with people living from hand to mouth. Anyway, they talked about the past events like the 1967 Detroit riot. And you're thinking, what is that? Let's talk about that briefly. So, the main cause of the Detroit riots in 1967 included systematic police brutality and mistreatment of African American residents, deep patterns of racial segregation and discrimination in housing, education, and employment. So, basically, people rioted because they've been forced into a situation where there was a lot of money, economy was booming, but they were excluded from it, and they couldn't get housing, education, employment. And so what that does is that it breeds generation of families living in poverty, and then when you get used to that, people are fed up, they get depressed, fed up, and then they fight back. Anyway, let's move on. The interesting thing in this video from Peter is that some blocks in the area are immaculate. The gardens, the parks were nice, and others were just run down. So the view is that not everything is actually bad. There are other areas that are no-go areas, but not the whole city of Detroit. Ordinary people with businesses are still there, hair salons, restaurants, people playing tennis. You have a tennis court, people there just doing irregular, normal things that people would do. And there are people who have been unable to find jobs for about 2 years. Inflation is a big problem for small businesses where they said once upon a time they have a menu. If you have a restaurant and you put a menu for maybe a meal for, I don't know, $14, $15, and that's based on the fact that you're going to get the raw materials for this price. And once the inflation came in, then it's no longer, you're no longer making any type of profit from your business, and you have to up the price. But then because people in your area don't have the means to come and eat out, it becomes a problem that then small businesses will either die or just increase the price. As a firefighter in the area in Detroit, I can attest to the city coming from the ashes. It's slowly getting better day by day. The people are fighting for their city and it's working. Just 2 years ago, 99% of these neighborhoods had no groceries, no banks, no services. Now it's Detroit's time to shine, and I'm blessed to be able to witness it and help in my own little way. So, the video actually shows that people in Detroit, things are beginning to get better, and although there's still crime, but not as bad as what it used to be. And now people are some people who left came back, and they're building things, and things are improving, which is a good thing. Another one, The Rise and Fall and Rebirth of Detroit, Abandoned by Vice. And this video takes a look at the massive landscape of abandoned ghost towns and factories in Detroit that were once booming in the 50s and how those have been abandoned. And the biggest abandoned factory apparently in the world is in Detroit. And this factory is called Packard Car Factory. The old Packard Car Factory in Detroit, USA is a prime example of once great manufacturing company that has failed. The 325,160 square meters factory now stands abandoned. It is massive. And yes, it is big, but that is not what you would like to be known for. Yeah, we have the biggest abandoned ghost town or factory in the world. What's the point of having that? Anyway, another interesting thing in the video talks about the factory is so big that tourists will visit, but then they get robbed, so they had to put security in place. And in some cases, some people were so desperate and poor that they would pay someone to burn their houses, to burn their house and then claim insurance, and then use the money to either start a business or leave Detroit completely. And others are trying to start up businesses like compost for fertilizers that are then used by farms in Detroit. They want the government to also help the less affluent areas in Detroit, not just only the downtown area. They've also noticed that now that it's beginning to become a bit stable, more money is being poured in, but the money is being used to gentrify the area, which is now pricing out the local people who are already not very wealthy out of the area. And then what happens is that you've been living there, they didn't invest in you trying to improve your community, but then they bring in new money, they restore part of the area, prices go up, you can't afford to keep up, they buy you out for cheap, and then they make a profit. And people are saying that is just not good. Okay. And then another interesting idea is that some young people are using abandoned buildings and transforming some of the parts of the building into skate parks so that young people will have something to do. And towards the end of the video, it talks about the real Detroit and the story of 8 Mile. So you have 7 Mile and then you have 8 Mile. What's the story? So, 8 Mile Road is famous for its significance as a physical and psychological dividing line. It separates the predominantly African American urban core of the city of Detroit from the more white suburbs to the north, 8 Mile. But the important part was that it was a divide, and the divide meant that they wanted to keep the poor during the segregation. They wanted to keep the poor black Americans on one side of the city and then the wealthy white on the other side, which doesn't help, because then they're wondering why they're poor and they're down on their luck, because it was designed like that. Anyway, let's move on. Detroit seems to have been a victim of its history, where when the economy was booming, only a few or a segment of society was able to benefit from it. And then once it is no longer booming, and those who have been victim of the segregation and the poverty and the discrimination in housing, jobs, education are now being blamed for ruining the city, which is very sad.